What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Drury Outdoors 100% Wild Podcast, episode 158. I'm Tim Chelsvik.
I'm Matt Drury, and I'm excited because we got a special guest today and a guy that knows his stuff in not only deer hunting, turkey hunting, just overall. He's a wealth of information, and I think we're going to have a fun podcast with this guy on.
Yeah, he's a certified wildlife biologist, and he's QDMA's Director of Conservation. We've got Kip Adams in the house. Kip, welcome aboard.
What's up, buddy?
Hey, good to see you guys. Thanks for having me on.
And we appreciate you taking the time.
You too. I know we're all kind of having a palate cleanse right now from turkey season. You're still chasing longbeards out in Pennsylvania, right?
That's right. My buddies across the country that were killing turkeys long before our season came in. So we came in late this year. We didn't start till the beginning of May. So we have it till the end of this month. So we're right into the thick of it right now.
We were off air talking about a tradition that you have with a firearm. Why don't you share a little bit about that with our audience? Because this is pretty cool, man. This is awesome.
Sure. I was very fortunate to grow up in a hunting family, and my grandmother Adams passed down to my dad and then to me an old Stevens single shot 410. And first day that I ever went hunting in my life, as a little kid, I was carrying that with my dad. So the first stuff that I ever shot was with that. Fast forward a lot of years later, my young daughter, her first turkey, she shot with that same gun.
Cool.
And my son Bo now, who's 11, hopefully his first turkey will be with that as well. So it's pretty cool to carry that old single shot, knowing how many days that I've carried it in the past, and that maybe another generation of hunters will get to use something that his great-grandmother shot a lot of game with a long time ago.
That's crazy to me. How old is the gun, do you think?
I'm not sure. My grandmother would be well over 100 today. So, back in the late 70s is when I first got to use it. So it was pretty old then. So, 40 some years ago, it was old. So it's really old today, but pretty cool. We've taken care of it over the years, and it's amazing, how those old guns, not a lot of moving parts. So you keep them clean and take a little bit of care of them, and they still shoot.
Elegant simplicity. And it's interesting that your grandmother passed it down, because we've all heard stories about this is grandpa's gun, and it goes through the generations, but it was your grandma's.
That was my grandpa and grandma Adams were farmers, and on that side of it, my grandmother was the hunter. So my grandpa didn't hunt, my grandmother did, and then of course my father did. On the other side of the family, my mom's father hunted. My grandmother on that side didn't. So I had one grandparent on each side that hunted. But yeah, you're right. It is kind of strange that it's my grandmother was the hunter on that side and not my grandfather.
I bet as your daughter grows older and she looks back, that will be a special connection for her to think that she used, her great grandmother's gun. Yeah. Pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So we're talking about a palate cleanse from turkey season, and you and I both had decent seasons. We both tagged out, which was great. But now we're kind of shifting gears a little bit and thinking about deer. And you came across an article that Outdoor Life published, Into the Mind of a Rutting Buck, and it really challenged a lot of preconceived notions that we have about what happens to bucks during that time of year.
Yeah, and as I was looking at the article, and you and I both about the same time, we realized it was an older article, but it was the first time I had seen it, and it was interesting to me because a lot of the topics that were touched on in there, and there was like 9 different myths or something like that. A lot of the topics I hear Mark and Terry talk about all the time. And it's like, oh man, I've heard them say this. This is cool. And so I just found it really interesting. And of course, our great friend, Dr. Grant Woods, was quoted several times. And then Kip here was also quoted quite a few times. And I thought, you know what, let's get Kip on and just get his opinions and thoughts. And it kind of gets us into that deer season mode. Once the summer hits, man, it's full steam ahead. And we're all singularly focused.
Yeah, right. So ready for it. So one of the things that I've always thought and have heard is that rutting bucks travel a lot. They really put on the miles looking for hot does. They're cruising. We hear the term cruising a lot. So Kip, what's behind that? Is that true, or is that not exactly the case?
Well, sometimes it is. And one of the cool things today is we have the opportunity to put GPS radio collars on deer. And, there's a lot of deer now across the whitetails range that have wore GPS collars. So the amount of information that we have gotten in the past decade is just incredible, especially relative to movement. And that's really where a lot of the research is today. We know a lot about what they eat, how they see, and all that. But a lot of the more interesting data from my perspective or projects have involved how they're navigating the landscape, how they're moving, when they're moving. And so we have this type of information to know, are they, all over the place during the rut? Are they just holing up during the rut? And what we see time and time again with these movement studies is that bucks are really individuals. Some of these bucks have large home ranges. Some have very small home ranges. Some of them move a lot, some not so much. And even some bucks with big home ranges don't tend to move all that much. It takes them a long time to get all the way through that. So I think that as we learn more about it, we realize that it's not a one-size-fits-all thing when it comes to how deer move, particularly during the rut of the year. We do know that all deer tend to move a lot more during the rut than at other times. But even within that, some deer, they just move a little bit more than the rest of the year, while some deer, it's just insane how far they travel. They're just all over the darn place.
And the study that you all referenced in this article, they talked about the deer that were collared for this thing. They were talking about they stuck to a range of like mostly 60 to 140 acres. And I felt like that was very applicable to probably what a lot of guys have to hunt. 60 to 100 acres, 150 acres. Like that's kind of it gave me hope. It's like, all right, because I always feel like on the lease that it's a crapshoot.
Because it's not big enough.
Yeah, just it's big enough, but the type of ground that it is, it's more ag than it is timber. I feel like I don't have enough bedding. I don't have enough bedding, and so I always feel like, the neighbors got them, and I'm hoping they're gonna come over,
spill out,
and we plant the food plots and all that stuff. But this kind of gave me hope. It's like, well, maybe they are actually kind of in my area, and I'm just I have found ways to adjust my tactics over the last few years to see them a little bit more.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's cool from a hunter perspective, and I tell you, look, I've been lucky. I've been a wildlife biologist for well over 20 years now, but I am first and foremost a deer hunter. So all of the stuff that I do or hunters I talk to, I try to take stuff that we learn through research and relate it from a hunting end, because that's how I think about it. I don't think about it as just a scientist or as a researcher. I think about it, how am I going to use this to get closer in the fall or help others get closer in the fall? So, the way I look at this is we're lucky today we have the opportunity to use game cameras, way more than ever before. So with cameras, if we're using them, you can get a really good idea on, okay, some of these bucks that I'm seeing, am I seeing some of them over and over and over again where it's like, I probably am right in its core area where if I choose to pass this deer, I at least stand a good chance of seeing him again in the future versus, I've pulled 50 cards, I've looked at 10,000 photos, and I have 2 pictures of a certain buck. You know what? Probably better cause that you might be at the fringe of where his range is or his home range, or maybe just an excursion where it's the only time he's ever been there. So I think as hunters, we can use some of the cameras and technology available to us to really help us decide with those particular deer, how killable they probably are for us.
Yeah, I think everybody, can recall getting a trail camera photo of a buck one time, and he was like some giant stroll through, and it's like, where'd he come from? And then you're hunting a deer that probably is not really there to begin with. Like you said, he just so happened to be strolling through. That's I feel like that happens at least once a year to me.
Yeah, because we always hear from people that, I've got 1 million cameras or pictures, and it's the only one I ever got of this deer.
Yeah,
or do this all the time, and he got killed 5 miles away. But that, some of that research with the movement too, that looks at excursions, where deer or excursion is defined as, a deer leaving its home range, and going 1 to 5 miles away over the course of just a couple of days and coming back. So, and we know now the more and more bucks do this during the rut, and likely, breeding related, they smell the doe or they're chasing doe, whatever. We don't know exactly why, but we know they're doing this, which I think from a hunting end gives us hope too, because I tell people, particularly during the rut, even if you aren't seeing what you want to see while you're hunting, keep going, because that bruiser from down the road, he might be a mile away. Tonight might be the night that he goes through your property.
So yeah, you never know.
So I think it can, deer, they can help us both in. So, but you got to be there to see it happen. So it's sometimes, if you're tired or you don't want to get up in the morning, just knowing that helps me get out of bed sometimes, that, hey, today could be the day.
Yeah, right. Nothing beats time on stand. Now, how about the moon phase dictating when does are bred?
This has been believed for a long time. A good friend of mine, Charlie Alsheimer, who's now passed away, phenomenal deer photographer, phenomenal behavioralist with deer, great writer. And he really presented this and had followers around the country that believed this, partly because it seems like, that lines up. The moon, we know, impacts fish and some other things, but it just seemed like, this probably does impact deer too. However, this is very clear with all of the research. It absolutely does not impact breeding dates. Zero correlation with when does are being bred in the moon phase. That doesn't mean that the moon doesn't have something to do with travel. And, we haven't shown, we being researchers in general, haven't shown that the moon does impact some of this travel. However, just as a hunter, and I personally have seen it enough times and talked to enough good hunters that have seen this, that I do believe the moon does have some impact on some deer travel, even though we haven't shown it yet. And I think that's what a lot of hunters are seeing and just misinterpreting this as, okay, this is what's leading to breeding dates. But it's very clear we can pull fetuses from does in the spring that have been hit by cars or harvested or whatever, measure them using the fetal scale and backdate it and know exactly the day that doe was bred. And actually, the founder of QDMA, Joe Hamilton, developed this technology a long time ago, back with research he was doing in deer pens. So, we know exactly how to figure out when does were bred. So because of that, we can then look year in and year out at when that full moon falls in the fall to see, hey, does this move the breeding dates or not? And we know it absolutely does not. So we know the moon does not impact breeding. It possibly impacts some movement. And I just know too many good hunters that I trust and things I've seen to think that, there is some impact there on some deer movement. We just don't have that part figured out yet, but definitely not impacting actual day. Those does are being bred.
Yeah, Mark's been pretty adamant about that for a long time, and his and Terry's stance more or less is, definitely it in the moon phase, much like the weather, it's impacting what visibility you have on the rut.
Sure.
If it's hot out, that rutting activity takes place in the nighttime. If the moon's backwards, that rutting activity tends to take place at the nighttime. But if the moon's right, the weather's good, you're gonna see it amplified when you're in the stand during the daytime. And so that's one of the things about DeerCast even that I feel like it's such an intricate part of that algorithm and tool. Like, you set your peak estrus date. It's preset for you. We have some presets kind of from around the country, but that's not even perfect. Like, you need to go in and preset it to what to believe whether talking to your local game agencies or whatever, preset that peak estrus date, and it's going to slide the entire scale of the 13 phases to fit your area. And then from there, the weather and all the different factors that we put into each phase of the season will take care of what movement you should be seeing. Right. I mean, it really is an intelligent way to look at it. And I think it really lines up with what you're talking about here in your findings, Kip.
No, I think so too. And I mean, there's so much about movement that, we still don't understand relative to temperature, barometric pressure, all of this. And I think, deer are such a complex animal that it's just not as simple as, this factor or that factor. So I think that what you guys do with DeerCast, I think is really cool. And I think in the future, we'll continue to learn more and unlock some of those secrets. But particularly with regard to, we don't have the opportunity to hunt, every day of the season or as much as we want. So anything that we can do to study and learn and just tip the odds into our favor a little bit more, like with DeerCast there, I think that's great. And at the same time, if somebody does that, that just gets them a little more involved with what's going on, rather than just being a participant, you kind of go and sit, you're actually engaged with it. You're making decisions based on it, which just brings you closer to the whole thing. And I think that's excellent. I think that keeps people hunting longer. It helps them be better mentors to others that they're teaching. And I think that's all good for what we're doing.
No doubt.
Now, most deer hunters will dread a warm front during the rut. Now,
Yeah.
Now, Kip, what does the research show about warm fronts? Do they really shut things down?
I dread a warm front anytime when we get into the fall of the year, and partly just because deer are built as to be so insulating that they just don't like to be hot. I mean, it's just counterproductive for them to waste energy to try to keep themselves cool at a time of the year when they're trying to save all of that fat they can. So anytime that it gets warm when deer are in a winter coat, and particularly a big heavy winter coat, it just drives me crazy. So I don't like to see that coming at all.
Now, does it affect when the does are bred, though?
It not necessarily days when they're being bred. They're still going to be bred about that same time, but they're definitely going to be bred during cooler parts of the day.
Sure.
When we get in the fall, say we have a nice heavy jacket on and it gets really hot, we just take that jacket off and we're okay. And deer can't do that, so they compensate behaviorally by just spending more time being active when it's cooler rather than when it's so hot. So those does aren't controlling. Oh shoot, it's warm, I'm going to hold off being in estrus for another day or two or till the next cold front. They can't do that. So they're still being bred over a very narrow window. This may be during the coolest time of the day, which typically ends up being we can't hunt them.
Sure. So a little off topic, but a question I've always wondered about is, do a buck's rack, do they lose heat through that? Because I'm just thinking it's attached to their body, it's attached, near their brain, so there's a lot of heat in their brain. Do they gain anything by shedding that later in the winter? Like, is that a heat conservation effect for them?
No, they definitely can lose heat through that while they're in velvet. But once those antlers harden, there's no more functional blood supply in that. So once the antlers harden and that velvet comes off, then they're not losing any heat through those. So,
gotcha.
But it wouldn't make any difference if those are on or off during the winter relative to heat that they're saving.
Okay. And how about bucks shacking up with does for several days? What does the science say about that?
The science is really clear on this one that, when a doe comes into heat, she'll stay into heat for 24 to 36 hours. So if a buck, finds that doe just before she's in estrus, he absolutely will stay with her. And then when she comes into heat, he may breed her repeatedly during that estrus period. And if he's big enough and is able to, stay with her, he may stay with her that whole time. So technically, he might be with her, say, for a day until she's almost in heat, and then a whole day to two while she's in heat. So, where some people say, man, I watched this buck with this doe for a day or 2 days and they're really locked up. That absolutely can happen depending on when he finds her relative to her heat cycle.
Okay.
Or he literally may, find her when she is right at the very end of it, may chase off a younger buck or a smaller buck, breed her, and an hour later be gone and on to another one. So, but they definitely can be with a deer for a day or two, or sometimes a little bit longer. That absolutely can happen.
It seems like the implication there is that you can still have your chance at your target buck because they're not locked down for a full 5, 6, 7 days with one deer. They're going to do their thing, and then they're going to be on the move looking for the next doe that's in heat.
Nope, that's absolutely right. And, as hunters talk about the lockdown and, there's not much activity, that can definitely be happening during the peak of breeding if, there's a lot more does than there are bucks, or even if the sex ratio is very balanced, just where all of the bucks on a particular property have found a doe, that they can be with. So there's definitely time periods, and I'm sure you guys have seen that where, man, you're hunting during the rut, and it can be the most exciting thing in the world, or it can be the most boring sit all year long.
0 to 100.
Yeah.
It's one or the other.
You think, hey, I'm just in the absolute wrong spot. So I have hunters tell me all the time, man, isn't the rut your favorite time to hunt? And there's a lot of times it's not. Bucks are much more predictable before we get into the main part of the breeding.
Agreed.
So there's a lot of times I would much rather pick, that time of year to hunt. Now I'm never going to miss the hunting the rut, at least not on purpose, but I've had a lot more quiet sits during the rut than I have before that, when deer just tend to be on their feet a lot more.
The best big buck killers I know all hate the rut. They all love, early October. They all love, late December. They just, like you said, they kind of can get on a pattern at that point. But the rut, you just never know what's going to happen.
It's a crapshoot.
One of the things that I enjoyed out of the article was where you talked about does killing does early, are you killing your odds at a buck potentially being able to breed that doe, or will that buck then go leave the property and look for a doe that can breed? And the information that you guys got kind of more or less said, hey, they're not going to just go looking. Like, they can't. I think Grant Woods is the one that was quoted here. It's like it doesn't discern whether or not it needs to go to the next ridge over to find, because the doe that he was after here is gone. What do you think about that? I thought that was really interesting.
No, that's right. And I'm a fan of shooting does early in the year for two reasons. If you're in a situation where your deer herd is very low and you don't have that many does, then there's absolutely value in not shooting them early, and waiting until later to either shoot some or not shoot some. However, if you have quite a few deer, and particularly if you have a lot of deer, there is a lot of value in shooting early, partly because then you can remove some of those does and then just have bucks be on their feet more during the rut. Personally, though, from our end of it, I love to put some meat in the freezer early. And if we can hit a bunch of our target doe harvest early in the year, then that allows us to just focus solely on bucks when really the good time to kill bucks comes in. And then we can, shoot does where not our best buck stands. And so we're not trying to shoot does and bucks at the same time or kill all of our does late in the year. I am a big fan of shooting does early, and don't think that that's not messing us up at all from a buck hunting perspective, as long as we're being smart about not over hunting certain stands or putting additional pressure on bucks prior to the rut.
Yeah. So it's always that quandary. A doe steps out just before last light later in the season, and you're thinking, do I shoot her or do I wait to see what else is going to pop out maybe behind her?
I always fail with the choice I pick. Terry always picks the doe, and Terry's killing the doe. But I always think, all right, because there's so much that goes into just going out on a hunt for me, much like you.
Sure.
It's like, all right, I'm here.
Got to be smart.
And if I'm there, it's usually because the weather's good. It's like, all right, I got to be smart about this, and it never pans out.
I have an itchy trigger finger. I like shooting does.
Yeah, you and Terry get along well.
Yeah, Thanos of the deer hunting world.
Yeah, there you go.
Thinning him out. Now, rubs and scrapes. This one really kind of shocked me, because I've always seen rubs and scrapes as kind of territorial markers, as boundaries, but the science shows something that's quite different than that.
Yeah, that's right. And so rubs and scrapes both fall into the communication. And deer are very social, a lot more social than most people realize. And those are the two primary ways that they communicate. Think of something that's as sense of smell is as important as it is to deer, way more so than vision or hearing. So, they communicate that way. So that's the perfect way to be able to share information at, say, scrapes, these sites where then all other animals can come in and smell those and see who's there. And, some of the research with this is really cool. The folks at the University of Georgia have identified the forehead gland on bucks, and particularly older bucks, becomes a lot more active during the rut than younger bucks. That doesn't change that much during the year, but older bucks, that forehead gland becomes extremely active. And they've identified up to 50 different pieces of information about bucks through the glandular secretions. And so these bucks are then leaving these at these rubs. And, folks will say, I think that the deer made this rub to get rid of the velvet. And that might be a little bit true, but it's far more about a communication standpoint, where they'll break that cambium layer in the tree so the deer can smell that. They can see that it's a visual thing. Then they rub their forehead gland on it. And it's like leaving their calling card there. Hey, whatever, I'm Joe Blow. I'm a 4-year-old. I'm a 10-point. I had a broken G2 this year or last year, but it grew back this year. And so all kinds of information about themselves that they leave there through their scent, dominance, status, all this kind of stuff. So then other deer come through and can pick that up, and it's a way that they communicate. So it's not a territorial thing; it's a communication thing. Just like we leave signs on the telephone pole in a street corner. Exact same thing with deer at both rubs and scrapes.
We have a few guys at the studio here that are known by their glandular secretions, so familiar with that principle.
AKA time in bathroom.
What are you doing? They spent some time in there.
Southern Oklahoma, right? Or southern Kansas, several years ago, working with a friend, in the middle of this prairie, no trees anywhere. And, about 500 yards away, we could see this old telephone pole. And I said, do you ever put a camera on that? And he said, no, why would I, out in the middle of nothing here? And I said, drive to that right now. I will guarantee you there's deer sign. So we get all the way to it, and they had rubbed it so much over the years that it actually was in almost an hourglass shape. And I said, every deer, that uses this area is going to stop here. If I had one camera, right here is where I would have it. So it's just such an important part of communication for deer that both rubs and scrapes. And in the research on those show, lots of different bucks using, a scrape line. So it's not an individual buck that has his own scrape line. Lots of bucks are using those. Does are using them to check them out as well. So whether it's a rub or a scrape, it's definitely a way for deer to communicate, and great place to put a camera and see who's in the neighborhood.
I thought it was interesting that it was kind of noted that a lot of guys will hunt. When they see a scrape, they'll hang, a set near it, or a scrape line or whatever. And the point was made in the article. It's like, well, that deer hit it once and then he kept on moving. It's not like they're sitting there guarding it. And I just found that interesting. You might have more success trying to find the travel corridors going to and from those, scrapes, but sitting over the scrape might not always be your best bet.
No, you're exactly right. And the research shows that about 85% of all scrape use is made at night. So, after dark. So you are absolutely right, Matt. The best way to hunt a scrape is to find where that cover is, and then intercept the buck, just as he's going back to bedding after daylight, or, before he gets there at nighttime. So, scrape hunting can be very effective, but you're right. Sitting right over top of the scrape, that's a low odds game. You need to intercept them coming or going to be effective at it in most cases.
How about worn out bucks keying in on food? They can lose up to 30% of their body mass, and people kind of think, well, they need to go to recharge their calories. But the science is showing something that maybe is one of those examples of correlation doesn't equal causation.
Yeah, deer are built a lot like bears. Everybody knows that bears get as fat as they can during the summer and fall, and then they live off that fat during the winter when they hibernate. Deer are very similar. They just don't go to sleep. They survive winter by all that fat that they have gained in the summer and the fall.
Same here.
So living off that. So as soon as that testosterone level changes enough that, the deer have said, okay, I am done breeding now. I am back to feeding. Man, feeding locations become dynamite because, those deer know they have to have that, particularly getting into winter. So late season food sources, particularly in really cold environments, are just absolute gold in many cases, as long as they haven't been over hunted too hard.
Mm-hmm.
You can make deer wait until after dark to get there too, even if they're starving. But if you're smart about how you're hunting them and, haven't overpressured deer, boy, as soon as you can get onto some of those late season, like that during cold weather at the end of the rut, they can be by far the best sits you've had all year.
The way it painted the picture, it was like, all right, a 200-pound buck would be 140 after it lost that 30 pounds. And it's like, you know what? Like, I killed 2S2 at the beginning of January, and Scott and I were shocked how small he was, more or less body-wise. And it's like, hey, yeah, he just went all through the rut and lost a ton. So it's pretty crazy to think about like that. One of the other things I thought was interesting in the article, and I don't remember at what section it was in, talking about bucks, and I think it was when they were talking about home range, just in general security, and them wanting
that trumps all. Yeah,
security trumps all, and it made me think about that Roger Sapper 212
and 6/8
video that we just put in DeerCast. It's a DoD TV episode, and literally Roger Sapper's hunting this deer, giant world-class animal, and they see a trespasser come onto his property, and we're filming this. Mark was in the blind with him, and it was filming. And the trespasser is upwind, right? I got that right.
Yeah, because he put his wind over that buck.
Yeah, and so they're filming this 212-inch deer laying there, and this trespasser is 50 yards upwind of him, and that buck never jumped, never went anywhere. It stayed hidden in that it was just some tall grasses or whatever. And it made me think about, you're in the article, it was talking about security trumps all, and especially with older, mature bucks. And it made me think
invisible.
That Roger Sapper buck. It was a perfect example. He was invisible while this trespasser is
who was
by him.
actively hunting. That guy had a gun with him. He was ready to go.
Yeah. Hunter orange. He's walking around, and that buck never jumped. If he would have jumped up, he would have been dead. I would die to know who that was, and if that guy has seen video of himself at a distance. Yeah, I'm sure Roger has reached out to him since then. But if you haven't seen the video, it's worth going into DeerCast and looking at that. Go to DoD TV section. It's unbelievable to see that deer laying there as this hunter is walking around. It kind of changes your perception of what you think a deer will do in certain scenarios too.
Definitely. Security.
There you go.
There are a couple other points. We want to make sure that we're respectful of your time here, Kip. How about doe in heat urine? Is that effective? Because there's an awful lot of it out there for hunters to purchase.
Yeah, it certainly can be an attraction. There's no doubt about that. Deer key in on things. So you'll watch, does that bucks are chasing them. When a doe is in heat or almost in heat, if she's not quite ready and she wants to get rid of that buck, particularly if it's a younger buck chasing her around, you'll watch. She often will run. She'll stop. She'll urinate and then take off again. But what that's doing is by stopping it, that she knows that buck will stop and then smell that. So deer definitely key in on that. However, it is a myth that is how a buck tells if a doe is in heat. They do not tell from the urine. They actually tell from the glandular secretions that she carries with her. It's on her body, which makes sense because if you're trying to have, announce that you're in heat and you want a buck to find you, it doesn't do you any good to then leave, that calling card, whether it's urine, throughout your home range. It's a lot better to carry it with you at all times, such that when they do catch up, when the doe is ready, and she is the one that, definitely initiates this. And, when she stands, that's when, conception happens. Up until then, though, she's in total control of all of this, and it's to her benefit to be carrying the scent of estrus with her. So it's not actually the urine. Many hunters think that it is. Now, the flip side of that is, can urine be an attraction? Absolutely. Given that deer are so visually oriented, olfactory oriented in that sense. So it certainly can attract. Now, there's been some research that looked at the different types of urine. Doe in heat urine, doe that was not in heat urine, buck urine. Actually, they did this at Penn State, my alma mater, a long time ago, putting these different urine in scrapes. And what they found out on one of the scrapes, as a joke, they tested new car smell. What's even a deer? And they tested new car smell. They tested human urine, buck urine, doe urine, and then doe in heat urine. And what they found was that the human urine and the new car smell attracted just as many bucks as the doe in heat urine did.
I'm going to start selling my urine.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people out there that are filling the scrapes with their own urine. Now, that this is not a knock by any means on the urine industry. Urine definitely can attract deer, but the fact that it has to be doe in heat urine, that is not how bucks can actually tell if a doe is in heat. So they're attracted to it, but they're not detecting estrus by it.
Okay.
Aaron Bennett, who hunts with us, used to work for us.
Also urinates.
He swore by peeing in scrapes. He's always done it, and I always would see an uptick in increased pictures. I just thought he was unique.
Well, that's also true.
But it also goes to the point where guys are like the debate of whether you should pee in a stand or not, just off the side. And we've always kind of been in the opinion, or in the last, couple of decades anyways, that it doesn't hurt a thing.
Sure.
And what you're saying is that's pretty much proof. It doesn't hurt anything. Just if you got to go.
Yeah. It could be a positive for you.
Like eating an apple and throwing the core out.
I don't do that. It's ridiculous.
I've peed a lot out of stands. I am more careful out of a stand than I am in a scrape. I almost always try to urinate on the way to a stand, and I actually will stop at a scrape to do it, or even make a scrape, just to expose that dirt. So I will do that all the time. I'm a little more careful about being right at my stand just because I don't want that scent right there if I don't have to.
Sure, I gotcha.
However, I've been in the stand a lot of times and had to pee and so have peed out of the stand. So I'm not scared to do that by any means, but I will actually seek out places where I can pee in a scrape during deer season. I think that definitely has helped.
Team Pea Scrape.
Yeah. Sounds like the start of a new show. Let's do it.
Maybe we could I bet we could get more followers.
Right. Speaking of followers, one of our listeners from Ohio has this week's question of the day.
Hi, my name is Brandon Brugeber. I'm from Northwestern Ohio. My question is, I know and understand nobody can be totally scent free. Do you guys ever use or recommend a cover scent? I've heard old timers say fox, urine, or anything like that.
We should also mention that question today is proudly brought to you by RTP Outdoors, home of the groundbreaker 3-in-1 food plot implement.
Yes.
Thanks. We're a well-oiled machine. That's been established. But it's a great question because it dovetails right into this question about urine and odor profiles. So, Kip, what do you think about cover scents?
Brandon, I think that's a great question. I am a big fan of cover scents. I am super careful with regard to my scent when I'm hunting. Now, I balance out how I look at this. I have friends that are just way anal over the top of this, and they let their fear of their scent, negatively impact their hunting. So I'm not, to the 100th degree with cover scent, but I am very careful with it. I wash my clothes in a detergent so that, a scent-free detergent. I keep them in totes. I'm extremely careful with what I get on me, while I'm hunting. But more than anything else, I really pay attention to the wind. I'm fully aware that I cannot cover all of my scent up. A deer's nose are just too good. There's been enough research looking at, everything, all the different cover scents that we have and charcoal suits and everything else to show that, we can't completely fool a deer's nose. However, I think we definitely can tip the odds into our favor. So when I go hunting, I have my stuff in a tote. I put it on, careful not to get any other scents on me. I do spray down with a cover scent to try to remove anything that is there. And then I'm just ultra careful about the wind, and not only the wind, but paying attention to thermals as well. A lot of hunters will pay attention to the wind and forget about thermals. And I think that you can make a mistake with that. So paying attention to what's happening with a rise in air currents or dropping can help you tremendously from, watching what scent that is left on you that you can get rid of, where it's going.
Sounds good. Now, Kip, what's going on with QDMA these days? It's a kind of a crazy world that we're all living in and learning. How is QDMA responding and surviving the pandemic?
Man, it has definitely been crazy. I have been home more in the past 2 months than I think the last 18 years I've been with QDMA. And so it's been a good thing. Spent a lot of time with my wife and kids. And I think I'm starting to bug my wife a little bit. I think she's ready for me to get back on the road. But from our end, we've taken a hit just like all the other conservation organizations. With this hitting in the spring, we do a lot of our fundraising banquets in the spring. Almost all of those got postponed or canceled. We teach our deer steward classes in the spring and summer. Those have been postponed. We do private trainings for state wildlife agencies that have been postponed. So we have definitely taken a knot with, the world not being able to travel or with what's going on. I fully recognize that there's, a lot of people out there in a lot worse shape than we are. So I'm not complaining by any means, but definitely has not been business as usual for us. But we have done a bunch of other things. We're big in the educational realm. So at least we do have our online deer steward classes and some online stuff that folks can take to still continue to learn about deer and how to enhance habitat. So we're doing what we can and looking forward to a little bit of normalcy returning so that we can get together with our deer hunt buddies and friends again, and hopefully have a little more normal deer season this fall.
So, if people want to donate to the cause, is there a way to do that right now online?
Yeah, they absolutely can. They can go to QDMA.com and donate. They certainly can help by if they want to do any of the educational classes, the online classes we have. Those help us financially, and it allows them to get something out of it as well with regard to, some education on, all aspects of deer and habitat and hunter management. So, But yeah, anything like that, we're super appreciative for, and look forward to continuing to fight hard for all deer hunters.
If you guys can out there, you're listening, if it moves you to do so, it funds these types of studies, the research that comes out of it. I mean, it makes us all better in the long run, an organization like QDMA. So it's well worth it, and check it out if you haven't already.
Yeah. Well, Kip, thanks for hopping on with us. We appreciate it. We'll make sure that the QDMA gets linked up in the show notes if folks want to go learn more, and we appreciate that. So if you want to leave us a question for the show, go to dreoutdoors.com/podcast and click the send voicemail button. Leave your name, location, and your question, and we'll get that answered on the air. And tell your friends about the show, or tell people that aren't your friends.
Those people, yes. We'll link up the original article that we were referencing
from Outdoor Life.
Yeah. It's really interesting. So you guys should check it out and go give it a read. So we appreciate you, Kip, and thank you for coming on and spending some time with us today. If you need anything, if we can ever help, please reach out. We'd be happy to do so.
All right. Great to see you guys. Good talking with you as always, and have a good rest of the spring.
All right.
You too. See ya.
All right. See ya.
See ya.
We're adding new videos every week, so make sure to click that subscribe button and check out all of our amazing content. This episode of DoD TV was brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's.